Raila taught us.
Yes.
And it's on record.
Yes.
In fact, if you read his stint at the university, he started fighting for justice right then. Senator Maina says of a case where some student deserved a first-class honors, and for some reason, the university administration was not giving it to him. Raila pushed so hard as a lecturer till that student got that justice. And you move on from there. Raila worked for the Kenya Bureau of Standards. He set so many of the standards that KBS uses, especially in manufacturing. People don't realize that. And after his stint at Kenya Bureau of Standards, Raila was an engineer. He actually set up Spectra. Then that was the only plant in this region owned by indigenous people that will actually make cylinders. People used to import cylinders from out of the country. And he built that plant in such a way that it was now the one being used to do cylinders across Africa. And when people think that the molasses plant could not be used for anything, Raila's vision for industry and for thrift, he acquired molasses from a moribund state corporation and tried to make it produce. And when he was doing that, he was also looking at the area. He was also looking at the larger agricultural production in the region, because that plant, if it moves at full throttle, it will mean sugarcane farmers, it will mean sorghum farmers will actually have a livelihood from production, and not only for food. So he was an industrialist by excellence. He was in the energy sector. But one thing about Raila is that once he does things that are for him, or things that do have benefits for the people, it's not upon him to talk about it. Like we were saying and yesterday, from what Bishop Cordia was talking about.
Yes.
And people are now realizing that this was a very generous man. But he was not the one to go shout and say that, oh, I've given you this, I've given that. If you don't talk about it,
yes,
he won't say. Yeah, and that was him. And that's the kind of example we want. Even the Bible says what the right hand gives, the left hand should not know. Yeah, but as long as he touches people, that fulfills. So we need to see from our leadership, if you have this talent to be an entrepreneur, thrive on it. The setting up of KIE, if you look back to the history of Raila, he was among the few people who insisted through policy and agitation that there needs to be a cottage enabling process by the government. Just as KIE now came up, so that people like Raila then, as he was setting a Spectre, and others, entrepreneurs, will actually have access to funds and then access to markets in a regulated manner, so that their industries or their thrifts could actually survive from foreign competition. And he opened up a space. KIE has built so many people at the moment. Yes, so he did open
just
that.
Listen to that, and yet we always refer to him Lord of Poverty. You know, this is what politicians would try to show us about Raila, and him being MP for Kibra, and people trying to show us that side of him, and not showing us the desperate, or acknowledging the desperate attempts that he made to try and bring development. So it is good that before his body goes under, that these stories are coming out when his body is still right here on earth, so that those who followed him and believed him for all those many years can have an opportunity to hold their heads high and say, this is why we believed in this gentleman, because he had good wishes and good plans for the people and for the country. Something that many people forget. A lot of leaders, when you speak to them, it's all about, I will get in there, you know? I will get in there and I'll make changes. But when you try to interrogate them, and you journalists are very good at that, you know, interrogate a little further, you'll find that there's really very little there beyond them wanting to get into that seat. But for Raila, when he would begin to speak to you about what vision he has for people, for the country, for the nation, for the continent, you know, your mind would be blown. Blown to the extent that now when you left there, you will be looking for the next person to remind you of one small thing that you can grasp on, because it was too vast. Yeah.
And indeed, in terms of interrogation, let me interrogate you now, Job. Given that so many people are asking why are leaders and the people who worked closely with Raila or people who Raila touched at the end of the day, why are we giving him his flowers now? Why not then?
Human nature, Hashim. There are people who will not realize the impact that someone has given to them till they go. Yeah, and then there are, again, human nature. There are those who just don't get satisfied. Yeah, you get enabled, but you still think it's not enough. Yeah, and for Raila especially, because he was up not to give himself accolades. Like we said, if you don't talk about it, no one will know. Then people might think that he was not doing much, but he really touched all these guys. You have been seeing them in the media now.
Yes.
There are people who are ardent critics of Raila. They start saying, oh, he did this, he did that, he did that. Why? Because that's dawned on them that, you know what, he's gone. If maybe you don't say what he did to you, he'll probably go down with a curse in history. So you just have to come out and do it. And it's very interesting. I look at these people and say, wow, this is really who we are as human beings. Well, even Jesus said a prophet is usually never acknowledged in his home. So maybe for people who are outside looking, say, he did that. He touched people in education. The social program, like what Millie is talking about, empowerment of women. Raila was such a passionate crusader for women, both from development angle and in the political space. Youth, you see the majority of the people, you see how the youths are falling all over themselves against Raila. You saw what Truth said the other day,
yes.
and I know some Gen Z's picked it badly, but it was the truth. Yeah, Raila, all along, Raila has been saying that the future of this country, people say, is the youth, but the present of this country is the youth. And most of his agitation, he was already aging. He was agitating for his children and grandchildren. But at some point after the 25th of July last year, some Gen Zs picked it up. And they started thinking that Raila knew nothing about what it is to advance people. But they have realized, they are coming out to realize that, well, maybe we made a mistake. Yeah. We all wanted to achieve some certain objectives. And Raila had these objectives all the way from the 80s. Yeah. Some of the young people start thinking about this thing from the finance bill of 2025, when things that touch on them, things about internet and such, were touching them. But Raila holistically had already known that we have issues, and he had a systematic social and political ways in which he wanted those achieved. And I'm happy that the youth are now back. They're looking at this man and saying, wow, history is important. Let's just go back and see what this guy has done to even give us that space, even now, for us to agitate. People will not even have had a chance to go to the street last year to do what people are doing had Raila not led such or had such a vision to empower people for them to demand their rights. So I give him a thumbs up for that. Yes.
It is exactly 45 minutes past 6 a.m. and you can see, Millie, there is no difference between Mamboleo, Kasarani, Nyayo Stadium. The people are there, energetic as always, waiting to once again celebrate the man, because they are viewing this as a celebration, not even a solemn moment in the country, and they're in their numbers, Millie.
They are in their numbers because this gentleman was it as far as Kenyans were concerned. Many Kenyans were concerned. They knew that he had their interest at heart. And the fact that you've had many people speak to that over the last several days, that he was listening, he was a listener. He would listen to people. So that gave him that opportunity to understand even the complexities of life that people were going through, even that he did not directly experience as a person, but he could understand because he listened and would give people room to be able to express themselves. And I think that is why now many people want to come out and speak to it. Again, you know, like Job was saying, politics in Kenya, I hope that it will now change. Politics has been very, very difficult. The only way that you are outstanding is when you're coming out bold, making noise about something, seeming to oppose something that people are focused on. for that particular moment, whether it is amending the constitution. If you're coming out strongly to say BBI is the wrong thing to do, then you build a following, you know, and you enable your name. And it's just about that. So sometimes you'll be opposing it, but not for any justifiable reasons. And you'll find that many of these politicians, much as they knew, and that's why people would say that you don't trust politicians, that they will be saying this and in the night they're drinking tea together, you know, because they would be doing these things for the sake of us, because they know that we the people will only follow them if they are loud and they are abrasive and they are combative, and then we'll say we ndio shujaa, you know. But behind it, they knew that it's a little bit more complicated than that, and this is coming out so clearly now. As Job was saying, with people saying that, you know, this is what this man did for me, and you look and you say, this man, and you go immediately to the net that never dies, you know, and you look for clips where the same person was saying very, very different things about the late Tinga, and you say, well, so where is the truth, you know? Yeah, it's an interesting thing.
And indeed, Job, in terms of even formulating those bridges, mending those relationships, aside from even the BBI, recently before his demise, he was calling for a conclave, he was calling for a dialogue between all the generations, and following the sentiments that were made yesterday by Rose Odinga. Are we going to see these politicians now picking up those discussions and continuing with them at the end of the day?
Yes, this is a moment that Kenya should seize. This is a moment that doesn't happen many times. It's a once in a generation, sometimes once in a century moment, where as we reflect on how good Baba was, as we reflect on what it is that he stood for and what it is that he wanted for Kenya, and we see that Kenya is still an unfinished business. Maybe it's now a chance for everyone, even those who are very quick to dismiss the conclave, those who are very quick to dismiss the handshakes because of political reasons, will probably retrace their steps, take a deep breath and say, well, let's come together. Because it is through coming together that people can unite on an idea. And typically, if you use Baba style, it was not like getting everything. It was like, these are the things we need. If we come together and get even 2 of 10, like we were saying yesterday about the 10-point agenda, it's not like we must get the 10. If our coming together means we get 3 or we get 4, Kenya will be better off than that. This utopia where some people think we must get everything, we get it now, is not realistic, because we're in a dynamic society and things do move. So I hope that we, as a country, are going to reflect, and especially our leaders, let's take a chance of Baba's resting to carry out that spirit of coming together, agreeing on some of minimum things that we need to do so that we can move ahead and we progress. Because whatever little progress we achieve, we get it. But while we are doing that, Baba taught Kenyans that you should also be very wary of people who want to trick a nation. For instance, the 2005 referendum, people had been fighting for rights, liberties, devolution, democracy and such. A cabal around President Kibaki were misled. They used to imagine that Raila wants power. So they ran very quickly to Kilifi and did the prime ministers and thinking that Raila's life, all he wanted was prime ministership. He said, no, I was not interested in a position. There were big things that Kenyans wanted in a constitution beyond me being a prime minister. And in fact, if you move ahead to now 2010, when things were very tough, they again flashed in the prime ministership in there in an effort to take away devolution. You know what did Baba say? Do away with that prime ministership. You can keep the presidency as long as we have bills of rights and we have devolution anchored in the constitution, so that people can get resources and the rights equitably and power to them. And that's the lesson that we need to take from Baba. Yes.
And Millie, as you comment on the same, he also fathered another institution, or rather another forum called the National Dialogue Committee, that was chaired by the Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah and Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka of the Wiper Party, following what happened after 2022. So in terms of what leaders can draw from what Odinga has always been doing after every general election? Because you heard from Job, if he wanted that particular seat and cause mayhem in the country, he could have, but he decided not to.
Yes, it's true. And he was always, I think he believed a lot in dialogue. And that is why that is one of the things that you'll find stands out in the Constitution. Even when people agitate and say, why are we seeing, for example, the Chief Justice going to meet with the President? The Constitution itself talks about issues of arbitration, you know, issues of intergovernmental relations, and the need for people to dialogue and talk and try and resolve issues, because you know the law is very dry. It just looks at right and wrong. This is the process, there's no middle ground. So there's got to be just a winner and a loser. But when there's discussions, there's always give and take. And therefore you find a common ground that will end up being something that is good for the people. And this is something that Raila stood for over and over again. Every time when people were hardcore there, I mean especially 208, I think many of us who were alive then and old enough to understand will not forget 208, because many people desperately felt that this is it. If Raila does not stand firm, this is it. This is the only opportunity that he has to get into presidency, and this is the only opportunity he has to show the people who believe in him what he can do for the nation. And when he now suddenly backtracked, you know, many people were left startled. But he, again, in his true style, went out to explain to different people why he had to do this. So he's always about talking, finding a middle ground, and especially when he saw lives being lost. That is something that I think Raila did not like at all. That is why he would always have strategies, and when he's going for Mandamano, suddenly surprise people. You're expecting him to pop out here, he pops up another place altogether. You know, you're expecting him to end here, he ends in another position altogether, so that he gives his people, because he is the people's president, that opportunity to be able to feel that he still stands with them and that he believes in the cause, but he avoids as much injury or harm to the people as is possible. So I think that culture of discussion, of discourse, of trying to find middle ground in pushing these agendas that we have as a nation forward is very key. It is always the nation first, and if we are all to remain together, your interests, Job's interests, my interests, will never be the exact same interests. But if we discuss, we can always find a middle ground that will help us move forward so that you're happy. I mean, Raila even tried to, he compromised. We all know that. He compromised in 2010 when we got the current constitution, because it was not perfect, but he compromised and said we can try and change it then. When they tried together with former President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta to have the BBI process, there was this force not to have it. When we saw the NADCO process, a lot of recommendations that came up were just going to improve democracy and the devolution and all these processes. So he wanted, and I think he did sincerely believe, that we could still have the opportunity to better that document so that it gets to the guy draft. That was, I think, almost the most perfect draft that we had, including the number of counties, was something that he also even talked about, not to kill devolution, but to see how we can restructure it differently. So I think that if at this time when we are all celebrating his life, we are all living in his legacy, and we are all interested in gleaning something out of the struggles and the sacrifice that he made for this nation, it would be the perfect time for us to come together and agree that let us talk and let us push forward some of these agendas. If we get one or two, better than not getting any at all.
As I also comment, Job, but the million-dollar question here is, given that Raila Odinga compromised 5 times, given that he was seeking the top office of the House of the Hill, with the crop of leaders that we have in our country right now, do you think they will put their selfish interest and then decide to support what the nation needs?
Well, that's now what they need to learn from Baba. From what you have seen all through, as Baba has been compromised, you have been seeing many of them calling him a coward, a sellout, self-centered person, because they did not fully understand, despite the fact, like Millie is saying, after every time that he sought for dialogue, he'll go and explain to his coalition partner, he's going to explain to his base why he has dialogue. They will still not understand that. And it's probably a question of also high-stakes politics, where you want to be on the opposite side of anything that happens, with the hope that it gives you some political marks. But we urge them, now that we have an opportunity, and we have been talking about Raila for the past several days, and people are bringing out why some of these things that he did actually pushed the needle of Kenya northwards. As if we all agree on that, then it behoves on the current politicians to also pick that as a lesson in leadership, and know that you can always retreat. In leadership, you say you go to the balcony moment, you look at what's going on out of all the pressures and intrigues of the operational work that you have, and that gives you a chance to think clearly, and then now you go and start looking for what is the next best option. It's not always the best option that will push you forward. Yeah, you can always get the next best option, and you advance, as long as we advance. So I'll just urge them to look at Baba. Yeah, he is the best from what we have seen. Look at him, learn from him. Many of these people worked with Baba in his various political discourses, even when they moved. So pick from him and see how you can advance across. It's not always about I must be anti this side for me to advance myself. Yeah. If we agree on issues, yeah, then let us all say this is the issue that you want to advance. This is my way of wanting to reach and tackle that issue, and then this is your way. And then all of us go to the people. We agree this is the issue that needs solving, and well, who has the best method to get us? But not that what it is that we want to achieve is wrong because Baba has proposed it, or because President Ruto has proposed it, or because President Ruto has proposed it. No. These are the issues Kenyans want, and these are my way. And that's what has made Baba has ardent followers till today. His issues were always very clear. Yeah, always very clear from inception. I want democracy. I want Bill of Rights. I want devolution. I want civil liberties. I want women empowerment. I want the youth empowerment. Very clear. It is only that sometimes as the years go, you find better means of how you want to solve some of those issues, because moving from 1980 to 2022, the youth bulge was even going further. Globalization had struck even more. The East-West geopolitical pressures were now gone. So before you could get away with a country where if you align yourself to the West, things just happen, or to the East, things just happen. But as the Berlin Wall fell in the 90s, that was not the case. So you had to be smart, you had to work good, and you have to have good leadership for you to get some of these things in. And that's how Baba was. He will have the same issues he was looking for, but he could get different means based on the geopolitics, based on the current population, to try to get to that. And our leaders should actually ape that.
And if it is supporting the youth, he has consistently supported young people. How many young people has Raila brought into politics and given positions and led them into the limelight? Look at take an example of even people like Edwin Sifuna, the Secretary General, Ababu Namwamba, who was a former Secretary General of ODM, amongst many other young people, even the current CS Treasury, Mbadi. All these were people who were brought in by Raila. He held their hands, and he was able to support their journey politically so that they would be able to grow. Even as I mentioned earlier, people like Mabona, whom he thrust into politics and believed in that she would make a good politician, and he was proven right. And with all the people that he selected, most of them, if not all, you can see that he's been proven right. So I think that I can understand where the sister's pain was coming from when she spoke to the youth, because for those who have seen Raila's journey over time, they know that he has systematically and truthfully and steadily stood with the youth, and not just by words, but by action as well. And we saw a bit of that at the start of the Gen Z uprising in 2024, when they blew him kisses, and that video is now going around again. Told him, Baba, you stay at home, you've shown us the way, you know, now is our turn. But then subsequently, after that, our again very poisonous politics came into play, and people decided to poison the conversation amongst the youth, so that it was turned against Raila. But when it was turned, I think it's important for us to step back and look at what caused that turn and deal with that. That's why we need to have these conversations, rather than now perhaps isolating the youth who tried their best and started off on the right course. Let us remember that they were derailed somewhere by poisonous politics that was brought in when people started telling them that blood-based and etc. And that he did not stand by this. Yet you can remember even in 2023, before the NADCO process commenced, he even went and they had burials for all those people who had died during demonstrations. He said they must be remembered. And he was very categorical that the violence needs to stop. And even when disappearances were subsisting in the country, he stood up before his friend and his handshake partner in the broad-based and spoke against these disappearances. So it is true that he had that love and commitment for the youth at heart, and I hope that that will be embraced back, and the youth can step back and realize that this gives us, the older and the younger as well, an opportunity to come together and see how best to forge this journey forward. Because again, as Joba said, there's always got to be give and take. You may want to do things in this strategy, but if that strategy is going to break down the country, then how good can it be? You must then agree that let's tweak the strategy just a little bit, so that we are able to accommodate those interests, because the pace you're moving and the pace I am moving and the pace someone else is moving may not be the same. So, and I think that that is why you find teachers and trainers normally will stand up and say, I'm going to start from the perspective that we are all starting from here, you know, so that we all come together. So bear with me for those of you who are ahead, for the sake of those who are a little bit behind, you know. If we can all agree that there's got to be give and take, there's just got to be. We are too many. Millions of people, millions of interests. We are at different stages in different places, different interests, different concerns, but there's got to be give and take, so that we then move together, because the ultimate thing is we must remain together. If we don't, then what is it worthwhile for?
And indeed,
on that, when she talks about there needs to be a give and take. And again, as the guests have rightfully mentioned, there was that bit of Raila being at times termed as a coward, sellout, self-centered. So perhaps is it a moment of regret that now we look back and say, wait a moment, he actually wasn't coward, he wasn't self-centered, he just had the interest of you and I, of Kenyans at heart. Is it a moment of reflection, perhaps a bit of regret in how he had termed him earlier? Millie?
Yes, I think that it is a moment of reflection, that we must begin to speak truth, put our money where our mouth is, you know, begin to speak truth to the processes that we are in. We don't have to play politics with everything, you know. It's not always about showing that you're the toughest person on the table. I hope people had said that the Gen Zs had changed the way politics was going to play going forward. I hope that that change that had commenced with the Gen Zs will be reignited with the passing on of Raila, so that when people come to speak to issues and solutions, and not about bravado, you know, and showing us how much of masculinity or toughness is within you as a leader, so that we see that you are the shuja. We have already fought for our independence. We already fought for the second liberation. That time we needed leaders, tough leaders. We are now at a place where we want to ensure that we develop together. What we need now are good strategists, are people who are can compromise and can see the long picture and can see the far off picture. As we used to say of the former president Moi, may his soul rest in peace, that he was like a giraffe. He can see very far. What the rest of us are seeing here, he's seeing 20 feet ahead of where we are. So if we have more of such leaders, then I think that the conversations around people we will elect and people that we will look up to as leaders may change, so that it's about ideas. It's about what vision you have for this issue. If it's an issue of youth empowerment or inclusion of all previously marginalized groups, what vision do you have, and how firm are you about that vision, and how accommodative can you be in order for us to realize that vision? Because it's important to be firm, but it's important to be accommodative for that realization to be real.
And Job, as you comment on the same, still with the youth, even the former president, that is Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, at one time called them a ticking time bomb. If they are not employed, if they are not well remunerated, if they are not considered in the various discussions that are happening within boardrooms, at the end of the day, there will be a ticking time bomb. So in terms of what they wanted to achieve back in 2024 and what the comparison between the Raila Amolo Odinga of the time, the James Orengo, the young tax, what they did during the era of Moi, are there similarities? What will be the contrast between the two generations?
So the time that Raila and the Young Turks came up, the issues included even basic things like liberties. Yes. So people still want change. People have an aspiration for this good Kenya, but it all depends on from which baseline you are in. So Raila, Orengo, Muites, and the Young Turks in general, we were at a situation where Kenya had no liberties. We were a one-party state. The East and the West geopolitical axes were still very active. You could rule as a president with fiat and getting the support of America, for instance, or the support of Russia, and nothing will happen. So the first step was to give us liberties, give us that democracy, that freedom from which we can do what we want to do in a good manner within the law, rule of law, and justice. So that's where the first change, clarion call for change came in with Raila and the people that were with him. Now, when we moved to 2024, so if you look at the 2024 Gen Z protest, it came at the back end of 2023 Azimio La Umoja protests. So this period, if you could hear what Raila was saying, this was a period of economic liberation. We had gained some things, liberties, democracy, some justice. Now we are looking at economic liberation. And he was anchored at that economic liberation because of this youth time bomb. He knew that we had so many unemployed youths. And for us to sustain and contain them so that they are helpful to the general economy, we had to look at our economic policies and create jobs, number one, create thrifts, number two, and as we do that, we allow them access to finance and industries such that they can grow. In fact, looking at the manifesto of Azimio, when you compare what Azimio had and what Kenya Kwanza had, Kenya Kwanza had the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. The Azimio one was creating thrift and industry in all sub-counties in the country. So both of them knew that there was need to empower everybody, and the base is basically the youth, these very big 20+ million people. But how did you do it? So Raila's idea was create thrift, cottages and industries at the sub-counties. The youths will start getting employment from there. They don't have to move to the towns and urban areas to create some other issues, because when they congregate at the towns and urban areas, we have now issues of health, we have issues of housing and that, but contain them at where they come from so that everybody start having something to do. So by that time, the economic agenda of Raila in 2023 and the Azimio, the Sufuria movement, all those things, then came 2024. Raila pushed it with the Azimio team, then they reached the stage of dialogue, NADCO, just like Millie was elucidating very nicely. So NADCO now started to sort these things. They started agreeing on what they need to do. But then came the Finance Bill 2024. There were some things that came in, and like enshrined in our constitution, things that Baba has fought for before, we need public participation. So people started saying, you know what, this thing is not good in the current bill, that's not good, that's not good. But our leadership at that point failed people, in the sense that they felt as if they could still push in what it is they had put there, despite what people are telling them not to do. And for the youth, it started very simply, by the way. If you see what was happening in the online, there were just particular items on that bill. Yeah, so this one affects me, I don't want. That one affects you, they don't want. This one affects me, I don't want. Then people realize that, you know what, because we all have issues, this thing, we can have a movement where we can reject this finance bill. And then it grew into some youth protests. And then, as Millie also rightly put it, at this last point of it, politicians also took advantage of it and said, oh, people can actually come together. Let's also throw in our own agendas of overthrow this one and remove that one and ban that. And then the whole thing now became ugly. And Baba said, hey, guys, let's cool down. People have issues. The youths have very big issues. Everybody have very big issues. Let's calm down. Let's talk so that we can move this forward. So the youth have always been the basis of Raila's economic liberation agenda. And this is where we are. And he leaves us when that third liberation has not been achieved. And I think it's upon everybody to see if we can carry that forward, including the youth that he was fighting for. Yes.
But Millie,
just before you engage Millie again, Hashim, as Job is talking about the youth there, we have also seen on the screens perhaps the majority of the youth who are just there at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, which is in Bondo, Siaya County, the venue for the service just before, again, the body is taken to the Kango, Kajaramogi, the resting place. And what you're seeing, perhaps just different sets of choir entertaining the locals, the leaders who already are present there. You've also seen a bit earlier the military putting their ducks in a row in readiness for the next step, which is the beginning of that service, which had been scheduled for 9 a.m. You've seen them just putting final touches, sweeping around the red carpet there. You've also seen the designated area, the designated resting place where the casket will be placed. And just to inform you again, look at that, just perhaps chanting. I can assume the Joey, I can't quite hear, but I'm assuming that's what he is chanting. And as I said, just look at the youth, where your eyes can place as you look at the individuals or the number of people who are there. And remember that also the PS for Interior, Raymond Omola, said that they're expecting at least 50,000 people, but not so good in math, but I can see this looks even more than 50,000. It could even be more than that perhaps fill the area that this service or ceremony is supposed to be taking place. But remember, this is going to be the final service. We have had several others. There's been one that was at Nyayo Stadium, the State Funeral, and now we are here at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, just giving to you the kind of person that Raila Odinga was. Probably like almost everywhere the body sets, there must be a service just in honor and reverence of the kind of person that he was. As I mentioned, different sets of choir just doing entertainment as they wait for the official service to begin. Hashim, as you continue with your set of panel, perhaps Job can just tell us a bit, especially when it comes to the question of devolution, one thing that Raila really fought so hard for. In fact, as I had mentioned, one of the things that really didn't allow the constitution to be in place in 2005 as it was because of the question of devolution, which was amongst one of the key issues there. But again, also in his later times, it's one thing that he's really addressed so much. Remember when he talked about funds being, the CDF funds rather, being centered at the county level and not, as it were, as the constituency level. In fact, just even talking to MPs saying that they should leave this fund alone, never mind the constitution amendment bill that sought to entrench CDF amongst other funds. But then, in your view, do you think this is a conversation that will continue, or that has, as he has rested, it sort of like rests with him?
It needs to continue because devolution, for it to really work, needs funds. You remember in the Constitution we say that 15%, at least 15% of the funds that we collect every year needs to go to the counties. But according to Baba's vision, that 15% was really never enough. So from his party, from the coalition manifestos that Baba used to run, he used to talk of at least 45%. Because surely things like health, roads, agriculture, water, it's everything that we do. So why should the central government be remain with any money? Even that 45% in my view is an estimate. You need to go the Nigerian way. Yeah, 85% of all this money should go to the counties, so that the central government is left with foreign affairs, defense, and policy. Because all of us belong to county. Even here in Nairobi, we are in Nairobi County. So there's nowhere where there is a national seat. None. We are all actually in the counties. So we need to, in the spirit of Baba, the leadership, all the way from the executive to parliament and judiciary, needs to safeguard devolution, ensure that funds follow those functions. And those funds, just like in Baba's manifesto and vision, those funds should not be less than 45% as we do that. But even as we move there, there are some structures that still exist that are actually a disservice to devolution. The CDF fund is one of them. The roads bodies, the KERA and KURA, yeah, those are also an anti-devolution, because why will a bureaucrat, Job Ndege, sitting at Transcom House at Uphill, know what happens in Mlaleo, in Kwale? Oh, how will I know? But the person in Kwale will have a better understanding of the road network in Kwale and what needs to be prioritized. So even if nothing else, even if that money will still end up in Kwale from Transcom House, that bureaucracy itself of that decision having been to be made from Upper Hill and not to be made in the Mswambweni to do that will help, will give us some efficiency that will help. So I support what Baba was talking about in that, and I urge the leadership and also President Ruto to follow up those ones, because Baba was his brother at that point. He needs to follow up that agenda and get CDF, those road levies, off the MPs. And for the CDF, it's really common sense. Surely, the Constitution talks of powers, separation of powers. Who is going to oversight an MP if he or she is having 120 million shillings to use for them? Who's going to oversight them? They oversight the national government, but now who will oversight the MPs to do that? So that is even, and the courts have spoken so strongly about it. Whatever they're doing is an excess. They're taking advantage of the fact that they have some powers to do this, and they know, which is something that really our judiciary needs to come to terms and deal with. In my view, there need to be a permanent injunction against this thing, because what the MPs will do, as they always do, is once the court says this thing is illegal, and now they're trying to put it in the Katiba, but they'll come up with an NGF 2027, and then to run for another 1.5 years. People go to court. Meanwhile, they're still disbursing the 10 billion, and then you go to court. So that needs to be stopped. And there's a time this time where the judiciary should put a permanent injunction against the MPs from trying to amend the law in an unconstitutional manner. That's really
because for information, Job, they already made those amendments, and NGCDF, they're saying what the courts had declared unconstitutional, it was the previous one. Now they have a new one in place. But Millie, because that was among the functions that the ODM leader Raila Odinga attended before his demise, and he even talked strongly to members of parliament, asking key questions. What are you doing with this money? It's not meant for you. It is meant for the county governments to operate. And then President William Ruto even woke up and agreed with the ODM leader Raila Odinga, not knowing how the MPs will cry. And you remember, after that meeting, they went into the house, he went cry, and then they decided to ensure that the head of state at least appends his signature on what they had changed inside the NGCDF. But in terms of ensuring that this will be adhered to, we have talked about from Wednesday till today, the crop of leaders that we have in our country. Do you think there is that even goodwill to ensure they go to the counties?
You know, if the leadership is left to actually do the roles, only focus on the roles that the Constitution anticipates of them, then there are very many who may find it very difficult to show that they have been delivering. And the only way to show that they're delivering to the people is through a good administration of CDF, because at the end of the day, they will say, you see, I've been able to disperse school fees to so many orphans, you know, I've been able to rehabilitate a number of schools or to whatever, build a number of classrooms. And they will not be able to come, not many of them can be able to come and say that I've been able to pass this amendment to this legislation, or that I spoke very strongly to this clause in this legislation, or that I've been consistently in Bunge, even at the committee. I was very active in the committee that was oversighting the issue of roads and infrastructure, and this is my contribution to it. They may not be able to articulate that as well as they would the CDF, and therefore they must continue to hang on to the CDF. That is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is we, the people. We do not want our leaders to just go there and talk. You know, someone will say, well, aliongea huko bunge, but how has that helped me? You know, what I have is a problem. I have an Arambe here, and he has not contributed, or she has not contributed. Or the schools, look at the situation of the schools. You know, we have also refused as a people to understand and embrace the role of the elected leaders as envisaged in the Constitution. And therefore it puts these people in a catch-22 situation. And the whole situation, I think, is not helped by the fact that a lot of county governments have been deemed to be inefficient or corrupt. We had anticipated that when we had devolution, that suddenly there would be a lot of business opportunities and a lot of activity, economic activity at the devolved government level. But we find increasingly most of those county governments are still just waiting for allocations from the national government. And therefore that has frustrated the ability of county governments to be able to become that economically viable. So people feel that even the little that they've been given, you saw people sambazaring all over the internet, the ECD classes that were being done by Governor, what is his name? How can I forget his name? Is it Kangata? Yes, of Muranga. Yes, he was. Everybody was showing his ECD, and then they show another ECD in a different county, and they're saying, how is this possible? Even if with that we have not been able to see massive changes across the counties, then people feel that even CDF may just disappear the same way. So it's a difficult situation to speak to. But the courts, I'm glad, have been very, very clear that what the Constitution has crafted right now is very clear on the roles of elected leaders and on the roles of the executive arms of government.
And Job, in terms of that particular meeting, he did not stop there. He went even further to ask the senators, why are you doing the works of the members of the county assembly? So, because the main question that the senators were posing on the floor of the House following that particular meeting, they were asking, if they are the upper house, then what is their work with the county governments if they are not to oversight the county executive and the county government itself?
It's clear, like Billy is saying, the Constitution is very clear on these roles. So what typically happens with our parliament, in our view, is that they take roles which don't belong to them. And oftentimes the idea behind taking those roles is not because they are very good at it, but it's because it gives them an avenue to make extra money. Maybe because of the demands that Millie is talking about, all these demands people give of them. But that's is just an excuse. They need to make more money from doing this. The other day they were being bashed for going to Busia, and they went to Busia instead of going to look at things that need to help somebody at the border, and there's an officer of government at that border who can actually report to a Senate sitting in Nairobi. You know what? All these processes in the Busia border, we need this amendment 1, we need this change 2, we need change 3 in our rules and regulations. Senate doesn't have to move to Busia for them to see what goes on at the border. They don't have to. They don't have to move to Busia for them to know that the Busia County Referral Hospital, for instance, has issue 1, 2, 3, 4. Because there is an MO, there is a director of health. All those people exist in the. So they just need to make efficient the flow of communication from the grassroots to them. There's a county assembly that sits in Busia. That county assembly can be the primary and should be the primary oversight body on the Busia County government, not Senator Okia Mtata and his team sitting in Nairobi. So those are some of the things that Baba was talking about. Yes, we have brought devolution. Yes, there are issues with the county governments, but these issues require some structural changes. For instance, when Baba and the people, because Baba supported the people's draft, the guy draft that Emilio was talking about, people had said counties should be 10 to 14. Yes, it's the politicians, because they always love power, who decided that they're going to be many. Yeah, but the people themselves said Kenya can be structured 10 to 14 counties max. And if we have 10 counties, all this money now going to administer 47 counties, will not be wasted. We'll be having 10 CECs for, let's say, a province like Coast. There'll be 10 CECs there. Now Coast has 7 constituencies, there are 70 CECs. Why? Why do we need that? We'll be having 10 counties. We're having 7 county assemblies in Coast. There will be 1, the Coast County Assembly. So we'll be saving on these monies and the resources that we are now spending to administer the county government. It's very interesting that the law says that we need at least 70% of the funds that go to the counties should be on development and service. Which are now making some of that work inefficient. That's why he was very clear that he needs to relook at it. If you heard what he was saying, some of the things he wanted to do forward was to increase money, reduce the counties back to 10 to 45. And when he was saying reduce the counties, because this is one of the things that the politicians will pick up, he didn't say when you reduce the counties, you stop these counties existing. So he was going to create another structure which now does not consume administrative money. So the administration becomes the few, but people's power still continues in the 47 units, for people to feel that they're still represented. Yes.
But Millie, the conversation also, given that Raila Odinga is no more and he will not have his say on this particular matter, when he came up with that NADCO calling for a conclave, the BBI, the conversation was very rife in terms of the country going for a referendum. But how can that be? The constitution is just 15 years old and we're to even fully implement it.
The Constitution is a live document that can be and should be amended as necessary. And I think that one thing that we tend to forget is that Kenyans are not made for the Constitution or do not exist for the Constitution. The Constitution exists for Kenyans. So it's important for it to suit our purposes and for it to be able to become the perfect document that we anticipate it to be. You do not need, I think, to test something for 20 years or 40 years before you can say that this is not working. Sometimes, even just in the fact that you had to compromise for purposes of passing that draft. I remember that even those who are for the Constitution went around and they kept telling us that you just vote for, it's not perfect, it's not perfect, but it has got 85% of it. Especially I remember the late Kajwang was very good at articulating that, saying, you see, it's better than if 85% of it is good. Because remember that the church then, which is a very powerful ministry, was not for the constitution because of the of facts that they felt would not promote the interests of the church. And a lot of people listened to the church. I remember particularly going to one doctor. I'd taken my child to see them. And as we were seated there, I asked them, are you going to vote for this constitution or against it? And this doctor tells me, I'm going to vote against it. And I asked her why. She said, well, I was in church the other day and we were told that this constitution is not good. And I then had a conversation. That is how powerful the church was. So they had to compromise and tell people that we agree it is not perfect. But then after that, we have refused to go back to that step where we said we agree that it is not perfect. And look at it. Look at the issue of the constitution being a unifying document. Devolution as currently structured is not unifying. It has taken us into ethnic conclaves. And even though the act that guides devolution tried to say that each county must employ at least 30% of people from outside the county. Yes. What people have done is in Siaya, the 30% will come from Kisumu and Homa Bay. You know, chances of you finding that the 30% will come from Taita, will come from Kiambu, you know, will come from Bungoma is minimal. In fact, I think the only governor I ever saw, because we were monitoring keenly then, try to do that was the former governor for Kiambu. Yes, Kabogo. Yes, Kabogo is the only one who tried to bring people from far-flung counties to include in his county government. So if that devolution as it is structured is not helping us come together or remain together, then we really need to rethink it. Because services, fine, at that level. But for purposes of political power, I think that maybe we need to go to the 14 that cuts across the former 8 so that we merge a bit of Rift Valley and a bit of Eastern, a bit of Nyanza, a bit of Rift Valley, you know, so that whoever has to become governor in that region has to have support across the ethnic communities.
And indeed, given that we're still giving you live images from the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, because that is where the last state funeral will be held. Of course, people have congregated there in their numbers, and Doreen told you a little bit earlier on that the Principal Secretary, State Department of Interior, clearly stated that over 50,000 people will be arriving there. And she clearly stated she's not good at math, but over 50,000 people already there. But Doreen, we want to give our viewers live images of Opoda Farm as well, given that that is where the casket that is hosting the former premier, that is Raila Odinga, arrived at his home later in the evening on Saturday especially, and spent an overnight there for public viewing as well. That is the gate that we saw yesterday, a mammoth of crowd attempting to push past the Kenya Defence Forces, the military police and the National Police Service so that they can gain entry. We even saw at moment times that Ida Odinga was coming out to address them and talk to them and telling them to calm down so that the security forces can ensure the process goes on smooth. But Doreen, the main question is, will they use the gun carriage that the KDF was using here in Nairobi to transport it from Opoda Farm all the way to Jost, because many people are saying it is not far from Opoda Farm to where the funeral is going to be held.
That's right. And you just had to rub it in. My math was not good. Yeah, it's just a few kilometers, given that these are venues still in the same county. And as you rightfully put it, the body still is in Opoda Farm. That is Raila's home, actually, in Siaya County, where the night vigil had been taking place. Remember that this happened after the body moved from the Mamboleo Stadium all the way to Opoda farm. It was airlifted, which again was just sort of like averting the initial plan of instead moving it by road, and they chose to airlift it, and it has been at Opoda farm for that night vigil. This just perhaps in line with, you know, those Luos or Luya traditions whereby the body has to lay in the home before it is before the person or the one who died is actually buried, and then in a few minutes we expect that body to move from Opoda all the way to the Just University there. And I think they're also just trying to consult how best to move it, because again, the whole point of moving it by road, sometimes with the crowds that we've been seeing, and the case scenario that we also see, so in Nairobi, sometimes there's there those last minute change of plans to ensure that everything goes as per plan. What you're also seeing live on your screen right there, it's at the Jomo Kenyatta University. That's the Just University, rather, of Science and Technology, still in Bondo, Siaya County. And you've just really been seeing the military putting the final touches, final preparations, carrying the floral there to just ensure everything is in place the moment the body arrives. But a quick look